So, hello and welcome to this Friday evening, 17th of April 2020, special edition of Tarot On here in the Facebook group for tarot professionals on behalf of the Tarot Association. Get all your tarot training and needs at www.tarotassociation.net. This is a sponsored advert for the Tarot Association. So, what we're going to do today is I'm going to read a special bedtime story, and that's all I'm going to do for this evening's session. If you're into only the tarot, if you don't want to hear the bedtime stories, then please skip on to our next video or go back and have a look at all of our previous videos. Every weekend, I deliver a longer bedtime story. Other than the ones we've been reading from Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities collection. And we're going to shift those as well at some later point, depending on how long our lockdowns last for during this global pandemic. And I'd also like to congratulate us all on having chosen a name for ourselves. We are now the official Order of Hermits, the Illuminated Order of Hermits, the Illustrious Order of Hermits, the Rambunctious Order of Hermits, but whatever we are now the Order of Hermits. So welcome one and all to the Order of Hermits. I'm just going to type something into the welcome to the Order of Hermits into the chat, because sometimes that sort of kicks it going if it's not actually working. Okay then, so this evening, possibly in two parts, depending on how long this takes. It is a 50-minute reading, something like that, but I might actually deliver this into sort of two parts. So we'll do one part today and one part tomorrow, depending on how we go. I'd also like to just briefly introduce the author. It is Philip K. Dick. I'm going to read from a science fiction, mainly author called Philip K. Dick. He was born in the 1920s and died in 1982, just like literally a couple of years before Blade Runner, the film Blade Runner by Ridley Scott was released. And Philip K. Dick was important in that because he wrote short story called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And that was what Blade Runner was based on. Also, Philip K. Dick was the author of Man in the High Castle, which has been recently converted to an Amazon series. I think it's in its third series now. And Man in the High Castle is an interesting novel because it is set in a alternative future where the Axis powers, Germany, Japan, won the Second World War. And so it's a sort of alternative history set in the 70s in a future version of America where America and England and so forth had lost the Second World War. And within the novel, Man in the High Castle, there is mention of a book written by the eponymous the Man in the High Castle himself, an anonymous author, called The Grasshopper Lies Heavy. And this book, within the book, The Man in the High Castle, is a fictional book that alludes to the English and American powers winning the Second World War. So obviously in Philip K. Dick's book, The Man in the High Castle, if you're following this, that book is an underground book. It's banned. Even having possession of it leads to a death sentence and so forth. But some of the characters who have read the book, The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, mention some of its contents, and some of them are sort of what our reality is now, and some of them aren't quite what our reality is. It's what they might have imagined in a alternative future as to what our future might have been like. And Philip K. Dick's short stories are full of these inner worlds, outer worlds, worlds within worlds concept. He was very influenced, and this is where he comes into our story with tarot and divination and occultism. He was very influenced by a set of beliefs called Gnosticism, and there wasn't really a single set of beliefs called Gnosticism, nor were there a single sect called the Gnostics. It's a general term used to describe a lot of the other belief systems that were going around the time of Christ. And some of these belief systems were completely wacky, even by today's standards. But they sort of collected together as Gnosticism in general, and Philip K. Dick studied them and was very influenced by them, and the I Ching as well, and an awful lot of drugs. He eventually died, having suffered about 3 strokes, I think, and he had a lot of mystical experiences in the mid-70s that he then wrote into his science fiction novels, particularly Valis, I think, is probably the main one. And there's some very strangely, I think the transmigration of Timothy Archer is one of the others that describes his own personal experience of being hit by a sort of pink ray from the sky that had this voice of a mystical god within it. And so Philip K. Dick really pioneered a lot of the ideas that we have in modern science fiction. And the story I'm going to read to you, called I Hope I Shall Arrive Soon, is very familiar in some ways, but not in others. And that is because it is a precursor. It's one of the original ideas that so many science fiction authors and books and films and designers and so on have been influenced by the work of Philip K. Dick. If you want to understand some of Philip K. Dick's writings, there is I don't know if it's online or not, but a short piece he wrote called How to Build a Universe That Doesn't Fall Apart in 2 weeks. I think it's in 2 weeks or a month or something like that. And it's sort of about storytelling, but it's also about what reality is. And reality and identity were very, very important themes to Philip K. Dick. So I'm going to read probably the first half of this story today, and then we'll pick up the story tomorrow. So I hope you're sitting comfortably, and we're going to read I Hope I Shall Arrive Soon. After takeoff, the ship routinely monitored the condition of the 60 people sleeping in its cryonic tanks. One malfunction showed that of person 9. His EEG revealed brain activity. Shit, the ship said to itself. Complex homeostatic devices locked into circuit feed, and the ship contacted person 9. You are slightly awake, the ship said, utilizing the psychotronic route. There was no point in rousing person 9 to full consciousness. After all, the flight would last a decade. Virtually unconscious, but unfortunately still able to think, person 9 thought, someone is addressing me. He said, where am I located? I don't see anything. You're in faulty cryonic suspension. He said, then I shouldn't be able to hear you. Faulty, I said. That's the point. You can hear me. Do you know your name? Victor Cummings, bring me out of this. We are in flight. Then put me under. Just a moment. The ship examined the cryonic mechanisms. It scanned and surveyed, and then it said, I will try. Time passed. Victor Cummings, unable to see anything, unaware of his body, found himself still conscious. Lower my temperature, he said. He could not hear his voice. Perhaps he only imagined he spoke. He could. Colours floated toward him and then rushed at him. He liked the colours. They reminded him of a child's paint box, the semi-animated kind, an artificial life form. He had used them in school 200 years ago. I can't put you under, the voice of the ship sounded inside Cummings' head. The malfunction is too elaborate. I can't correct it, and I can't repair it. You will be conscious for 10 years. The semi-animated colours rushed toward him, but now they possessed a sinister quality, supplied to them by his own fear. Oh my God, he said. 10 years. The colours darkened. As Victor Cummings lay paralysed, surrounded by dismal flickerings of light, the ship explained to him its strategy. This strategy did not represent a decision on its part. The ship had been programmed to seek this solution in case of a malfunction of this sort. What I will do, the voice of the ship came to him, is feed you sensory stimulation. The peril to you is sensory deprivation. If you are conscious for 10 years without sensory data, your mind will deteriorate. When we reach the LR4 system, you will be a vegetable. Well, what do you intend to feed me? Cummings said in panic. What do you have in your information storage banks? All the video soap operas of the last century? Wake me up and I'll walk around. There is no air in me, the ship said. Nothing for you to eat. No one to talk to, since everyone else is under. Cummings said, I can talk to you. We can play chess. Not for 10 years. Listen to me, I say. I have no food and no air. You must remain as you are. A bad compromise, but one forced on us. You are talking to me now. I have no particular information stored. Here is policy in these situations. I will feed you your own buried memories, emphasizing the pleasant ones. You possess 206 years of memories, and most of them have sunk into your unconscious. This is a splendid source of sensory data for you to receive. Be of good cheer. This situation which you are in is not unique. It has never happened within my domain before, but I am programmed to deal with it. Relax and trust me. I will see that you are provided with a world. They should have warned me, Cummings said, before I agreed to emigrate. Relax, the ship said. He relaxed, but he was terribly frightened. Theoretically, he should have gone under into the successful cryonic suspension, then awakened a moment later at his star of destination, or rather the planet, the colony planet of that star. Everyone else aboard the ship lay in an unknown state. He was the exception, as if bad karma had attacked him for obscure reasons. Worst of all, he had to depend totally on the goodwill of the ship. Suppose it elected to feed him monsters. The ship could terrorize him for 10 years, 10 objective years, and undoubtedly more from a subjective standpoint. He was, in effect, totally in the ship's power. Did interstellar ships enjoy such a situation? He knew little about interstellar ships. His field was microbiology. Let me think, he said to himself. My first wife, Martine, the lovely little French girl who wore jeans and a red shirt open at the waist and cooked delicious crepes. I hear, the ship said. So be it. The Russian colours resolved themselves into coherent, stable shapes. A building, a little old yellow wooden house that he had owned when he was 19 years old in Wyoming. Wait, he said in a panic. The foundation was bad. It was on a mud sill and the roof leaked. But he saw the kitchen with a table that he had built himself, and he felt glad. You will not know after a little while, the ship said, that I am feeding you your own buried memories. I haven't thought of that house in a century, he said wonderingly. Entranced, he made out his old electric drip coffee pot with a box of paper filters beside it. This is the house where Martine and I lived, he realised. Martine, he said aloud. I'm on the phone, Martine said from the living room. The ship said, I will cut in only when there is an emergency. I will be monitoring you. However, to be sure, you are in a satisfactory state. Do not be afraid. Turn down the rear right burner on the stove, Martine called. He could hear her and yet not see her. He made his way from the kitchen through the dining room and into the living room. At the VF, Martine stood in rapt conversation with her brother. She wore shorts and she was barefoot. Through the front windows of the living room, he could see the street. A commercial vehicle was trying to park with little success. It's a warm day, he thought. I should turn on the air conditioner. He seated himself at the old sofa as Martine continued her VF conversation, and he found himself gazing at his most cherished possession, a framed poster on the wall above Martine, Gilbert Shelton's Fat Freddy Says drawing, in which Freddy Freak sits with his cat on his lap, and Fat Freddy is trying to say speed kills, but he is so wide on speed, he holds in his hand every kind of amphetamine tablet, pill, spancel, and capsule that exists, that he can't say it, and the cat is gritting his teeth and wincing in a mixture of dismay and disgust. The poster is signed by Gilbert Shelton himself. Cummings' best friend, Ray Torrance, gave it to him and Martine as a wedding present. It is worth thousands. It was signed by the artist back in the 1980s, long before either Victor Cummings or Martine even lived. If we ever run out of money, Cummings thought to himself, we could sell the poster. It was not a poster, it was the poster. Martine adored it, the fabulous furry freak brothers from the golden age of a long ago society. No wonder he loved Martine so. She herself loved back, loved the beauties of the world and treasured and cherished them as she treasured and cherished him. It was a protective love that nourished but did not stifle. It had been her idea to frame the poster. He would have tacked it up on the wall, so stupid was he. Hi, Martine said, off the VF now. What are you thinking? Just that you keep alive what you love, he said. I think that's what you're supposed to do, Martine said. Are you ready for dinner? Open some red wine, a Cabernet. Will an 07 do, he said, standing up. He felt then like taking hold of his wife and hugging her. Either an 07 or a 12, she trotted past him through the dining room and into the kitchen. Going down into the cellar, he began to search among the bottles, which of course lay flat. Musty air and dampness. He liked the smell of the cellar. But then he noticed the redwood planks lying half buried in the dirt, and he thought, I know I've got to get a concrete slab poured. He forgot about the wine and went over to the far corner where the dirt was piled highest. Bending down, he poked at a board. He poked with a trowel, and then he thought, where did I get this trowel? I didn't have it a minute ago. The board crumbled against the trowel. This whole house is collapsing, he realised. Christ's sake, I better tell Martine. Going back upstairs, the wine forgotten, he started to say to her that the foundations of the house were dangerously decayed, but Martine was nowhere in sight, and nothing cooked on the stove. No pots, no pans. Amazed, he put his hands on the stove and found it cold. Wasn't she just cooking, he said to himself. Martine, he said loudly. No response. Except for himself, the house was empty. Empty, he thought, and collapsing. Oh my God! He seated himself at the kitchen table and felt the chair give slightly under him. It did not give much, but he felt it. He felt the sagging. I'm afraid, he thought. Where did she go? He returned to the living room. Maybe she went next door to borrow some spices or butter or something, he reasoned to himself. Nonetheless, panic now filled him. He looked at the poster. It was unframed, and the edges had been torn. I know she framed it, he thought. He ran across the room to it to examine it closely. Faded. The artist's signature had faded. He could scarcely make it out. She insisted on framing it and under glare-free, reflection-free glass. But it isn't framed and it's torn. The most precious thing we own. Suddenly, he found himself crying. It amazed him, his tears. Martine is gone. The poster is deteriorated. The house is crumbling away. Nothing is cooking on the stove. This is terrible, he thought, and I don't understand it. The ship understood it. The ship had been carefully monitoring Victor Cummings' brainwave patterns, and the ship knew that something had gone wrong. The waveform showed agitation and pain. I must get him out of this feed circuit or I will kill him, the ship decided. Where does the flaw lie? It asked itself. Worry dormant in the man, underlining anxieties. Perhaps if I intensify the signal, I will use the same source but amp up the charge. What has happened is that massive subliminal insecurities have taken possession of him. The fault is not mine, but lies instead in his psychological makeup. I will try an earlier period in his life, the ship decided, before the neurotic anxieties got laid down. In the backyard, Victor scrutinized a bee that had gotten itself trapped in a spider's web. The spider wound up the bee with great care. That's wrong, Victor thought. I'll let the bee loose. Reaching up, he took hold of the encapsulated bee, drew it from the web, and, scrutinizing it carefully, began to unwrap it. The bee stung him. It felt like a little patch of flame. Why did it sting me? He wondered. I was letting it go. He went indoors to his mother and told her, but she did not listen. She was watching television. His finger hurt where the bee had stung it, but more important, he did not understand why the bee would attack its rescuer. I won't do that again, he said to himself. Put some Bactine on it, his mother said at last, roused from watching the TV. He had begun to cry. It was unfair. It made no sense. He was perplexed and dismayed, and he felt a hatred toward small living things because they were dumb. They didn't have any sense. He left the house, played for a time on his swings, his slide, in his sandbox. And then he went into the garage because he heard a strange flapping, whirring sound like a kind of fan. Inside that gloomy garage, he found that a bird was fluttering against the cobwebbed rear window, trying to get out. Below it, the cat, Dorky, leaped and leaped, trying to reach the bird. He picked up the cat. The cat extended its body and its front legs. It extended its jaws and bit into the bird. At once the cat scrambled down and ran off with the still fluttering bird. Victor ran into the house. Dorky caught a bird, he told his mother. That goddamn cat. His mother took the broom from the closet in the kitchen and ran outside, trying to find Dorky. The cat had concealed itself under the bramble bushes. She could not reach it with the broom. I'm going to get rid of that cat, his mother said. Victor did not tell her that he had arranged for the cat to catch the bird. He watched in silence as his mother tried to pry Dorky out from her hiding place. Dorky was crunching up the bird. He could hear the sound of breaking bones, small bones. He felt a strange feeling as if he should tell his mother what he had done, and yet, if he told her, she would punish him. I won't do that again, he said to himself. His face, he realized, had turned red. What if his mother figured it out? What if she had some secret way of knowing? Dorky couldn't tell her, and the bird was dead. No one would ever know. He was safe. But he felt bad. That night he could not eat his dinner. Both his parents noticed. They thought he was sick. They took his temperature. He said nothing about what he had done. His mother told his father about Dorky, and they decided to get rid of Dorky. Seated at the table, listening, Victor began to cry. All right, his father said gently. We won't get rid of her. It's natural for a cat to catch a bird. The next day he sat playing in his sandbox. Some plants grew up through the sand. He broke them off. Later, his mother told him that had been a wrong thing to do. Alone in the backyard, in his sandbox, he sat with a pail of water, forming a small mound of wet sand. The sky, which had been blue and clear, became by degrees overcast. A shadow passed over him and he looked up. He sensed a presence around him, something vast that could think. You are responsible for the death of the bird, the presence thought. He could understand its thoughts. I know, he said. He wished then that he could die, that he could replace the bird and die for it, leaving it as it had been, fluttering against the cobweb window of the garage. The bird wanted to fly and eat and live, the presence thought. Yes, he said miserably. You must never do that again, the presence told him. I'm sorry, he said, and wept. This is a very neurotic person, the ship realized. I'm having an awful lot of trouble finding happy memories. There is too much fear in him and too much guilt. He has buried it all, and yet it is still there, worrying him like a dog worrying a rag. Where can I go in his memories to find him solace? I must come up with 10 years of memories, or his mind will be lost. Perhaps, the ship thought, the error that I am making is in the area of choice on my part. I should allow him to select his own memories. However, the ship realized this will allow an element of fancy to enter, and that is not usually good. Still, I will try the segment dealing with his first marriage once again, the ship decided. He really loved Marlene. Perhaps this time, if I keep the intensity of the memories at a greater level, the entropic factor can be abolished. What happened was a subtle vitation of the remembered world, a decay of structure. I will try to compensate for that. So be it. Do you suppose Gilbert Shelton really signed this? Martine said pensively. She stood before the poster, her arms folded. She rocked back and forth slightly as if seeking a better perspective on the brightly coloured drawing hanging on their living room wall. I mean, it could have been forged by a dealer somewhere along the line, during Shelton's lifetime or after. The letter of authentication, Victor Cummings reminded her. Oh, that's right. She smiled her warm smile. Ray gave us the letter that goes with it. But suppose the letter is a forgery. What we need is another letter certifying that the first letter is authentic. Laughing, she walked away from the poster. Ultimately, Cummings said, we would have to have Gilbert Shelton here to personally testify that he signed it. Maybe he wouldn't know. There's that story about the man bringing the Picasso picture to Picasso and asking him if it was authentic. And Picasso immediately signed it and said, now it's authentic. She put her arm around Cummings and, standing on tiptoe, kissed him on the cheek. It's genuine. Ray wouldn't have given us a forgery. He's the leading expert on counterculture art of the 20th century. Do you know that he owns an actual lid of dope? It's preserved under... Ray is dead, Victor said. What? She gazed at him in astonishment. Do you mean something has happened to him since we last... He's been dead 2 years, Cummings said. I was responsible. I was driving the buzz car. I wasn't cited by the police, but it was my fault. Ray is living on Mars, she stared at him. I know I was responsible. I never told you. I never told anyone. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it. I saw it flapping against the window and Dorky was trying to reach it, and I lifted Dorky up, but I don't know why, but Dorky grabbed it. Sit down, Victor. Martine led him to the overstuffed chair and made him seat himself. Something's wrong, she said. I know, he said. Something terrible is wrong. I'm responsible for the taking of a life, a precious life that could never be replaced. I'm sorry. I wish I could make it okay, but I can't. After a pause, Martine said, Call Ray. The cat, he said. What cat? There, he pointed. In the poster, on Fat Freddy's lap. That's Dorky. Dorky killed Ray. Silence. The presence told me, Cummings said, it was God. I didn't realize it at the time, but God saw me commit the crime, the murder, and he will never forgive me. His wife stared at him numbly. God sees everything you do, Cummings said. He sees even the falling sparrow. Only in this case, it didn't fall. It was grabbed out of the air and torn down. God is tearing this house down, which is my body, to pay me back for what I've done. We should have had a building contractor look at this house over a year before we bought it. It's just falling goddamn to pieces. In another year, there won't be anything left of it. Don't you believe me? Martine faltered. I watch. Cummings reached up his arms toward the ceiling. He stood, he reached. He could not touch the ceiling. He walked to the wall and then, after a pause, put his hand through the wall. Martine screamed. The ship aborted the memory retrieval instantly, but the harm had been done. He has integrated his early fears and guilts into one interwoven grid, the ship said to itself. There is no way I can serve up a pleasant memory to him because he instantly contaminates it. However pleasant the original experience in itself was. This is a serious situation, the ship decided. The man is already showing signs of psychosis, and we are hardly into the trip. Years lie ahead of him. After allowing itself time to think the situation through, the ship decided to contact Victor Cummings once more. Mr. Cummings, the ship said. I'm sorry, Cummings said. I didn't mean to foul up those retrievals. You did a good job, but I... Just a moment, the ship said. I'm not equipped to do psychiatric reconstruction of you. I'm a simple mechanism, that's all. What is it that you want? Where do you want to be? And what do you want to be doing? I want to arrive at our destination, Cummings said. I want this trip to be over. Ah, the ship thought. That is the solution. And we shall read the second part of I Hope I Shall Arrive Soon tomorrow. And I hope you've enjoyed that introduction into the work of Philip K. Dick. His short stories are very wonderful, very thought-provoking. The essay, if I can find it online, I will try and link it for us into the Facebook group, the one called How to Build a Universe That Doesn't Fall Apart in 2 weeks or 2 days or 6 months, whatever the, or in a year, whatever the title is. Now, unfortunately, I've not been able to see your comments yet again. This new live system is a little bit ropey sometimes, but I hope you've enjoyed our bedtime story. The second and concluding part of it will be tomorrow. And I hope it's given you something slightly to think about. As I've mentioned right at the beginning, a lot of Philip K. Dick's ideas predate films like The Matrix and other films that have taken this Gnostic idea that what is projected around us may not be entirely our own reality. And Philip K. Dick wrote a lot of stories along those themes, of which this is one of my favourites. So thank you for indulging me, and I look forward to reading the rest of our bedtime story tomorrow. That's Saturday. And on Sunday, we'll get back to some good old-fashioned tarot reading and a few NLP sections added into it. Okay, I now declare this meeting of the Noble the Noble Order of Hermits closed. May the light protect us, and may we protect each other and those close to us. Bye for now.